The best that could possibly have happened has happened in the Iran war, both for America and for the rest of the world. Swagatham, welcome. Let me explain. What I say could well surprise, indeed shock many people. It might not seem very obvious in an immediate context that the United States of America, the foremost military and economic power in the world, got a bloody nose in the Iran theater of opposition. Well, that's precisely what America got. Let's be honest about it. America went out of its way and got a bloody nose. In spite of that, rather because of that, why do I say that the best has happened, particularly for America and therefore also for the rest of the world? Well, my logic is very simple. And in order to set forth my logic, I have to invite you to consider with me for a very brief while an individual called Donald J. Trump, who happens to be the President of the United States of America, or POTUS for short. I request you to think of Trump not as an individual for the purpose of our thinking in the present context, but think of Trump as a phenomenon, not as a person, but as a phenomenon. As a phenomenon, Trump symbolizes anarchy or chaos gone berserk. I use my words advisedly, carefully, meaningfully. This is precisely what Donald J. Trump is if you examine him factually. He is chaos gone berserk. The last a little over 1 year, whatever he has done answers this particular description. Perhaps the one world leader who understood this aright is the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney. You recall that very memorable speech he made, where he referred to the fact that thanks to Trump, the global rules-based order is now fractured. That's the word he used, fractured. Now that's quite a serious statement to make. But that was in no way an overstatement of the reality. It's an accurate formulation of exactly what the state of affairs is. One man, elected by the people of America, has managed to fracture the global order. Therefore, am I exaggerating the case when I say that Trump as a phenomenon, not as a person, is chaos gone berserk? Or think of a few other things. Think of Trump in relation to NATO. The NATO has had a very well-defined and important role to play. It was the chief plank that America itself created in the post-World War period. And America was obviously the linchpin of this alliance. Trump, in his own inimitable fashion, went quite out of the way to insult, to humiliate, to alienate, to belittle every member of NATO. For what projected or anticipated gain, one does not know. Think again of the United States-Europe relationship, the transatlantic relationship. What did America stand to gain by alienating some of its most stable traditional allies? And yet, Trump behaved like a bull in a china shop and insulted everyone gratis, without absolutely any advantage or gain for the people of America in mind. He allowed his chaotic tendency to run wild. At the apex of it, remember what happened on that very unfortunate Friday in White House, when the president of a war-torn country, President Volodymyr Zelensky, representing Ukraine, invited to the White House to sign a treaty with America through the office of the president, being so publicly and painfully humiliated by Trump and his second in command, J.D. Vance. I don't think in the entire history of humanity, the head of a state has been in a state of hospitality. In the very process of extending hospitality to him, humiliated to the extent that Zelensky was by Trump. For what? For refusing to sign off a huge chunk of his territory for which he was not authorized, or for refusing to endorse Trump's absolutely contrary to facts prejudice that it was Ukraine that attacked Russia and not Russia that attacked Ukraine. A more monstrous deformation of facts cannot be imagined. Trump behaved like an oversized infant, threw a tantrum when the man who was his invitee, who was his guest in the White House, stood absolutely on sure foundations. Anyone who watched that particular most unfortunate episode would harbor forever absolute distaste for this phenomenon called Trump. So, in the light of these, there are many other references as well, but I think this much is enough to corroborate my description or my perception of Trump as chaos gone berserk. So, it is this phenomenon and not the individual Trump that I'm referring to. It is this phenomenon that got a bloody nose. If ever an abstraction get a bloody nose, that is. Now, why do I say that the best has happened? Now, either there is a rules-based international order, or there is an order in which might is right. You cannot play it both ways. Unfortunately, Trump wants to do both. When it suits his convenience, it is might is right. And when it suits his convenience in other contexts, it's international rules-based order, for which actually he has scant respect. For example, how can a man who respects the international rules-based order mount an attack on a country like Venezuela and spirit away its president and his wife and take him to America to stand trial there? And then, having done that, I can understand if that is done on principle, for example, declaring an irreconcilable war against the production and sale and distribution of drugs, hard drugs. But having done that, creating an arrangement with a lady, the then vice president, who would then toe Trump's line so that America will have a stranglehold on the vast deposits of oil. The world's largest deposit of oil is in Venezuela. It's estimated to be about 200 billion barrels of oil at a modest computation. So that is the world's largest oil deposit. So he has got hold of that. From there, he moved into the Middle East. And he thought it would be another cakewalk. After all, Iran had been weakened and weakened through years and decades of sanctions, weakened further by mounting a massive attack in June of last year. The people of that country had become quite legitimately restless. Conditions of life within Iran had become, and still is, unbearable. So, a country as weak as Iran, Trump thought, and in this, Netanyahu had taken him for a royal ride. Trump expected this country to be a low-hanging fruit, and he thought a mere touch it would fall into his lap. Now, even if you assume that Iran is the weakest country in the world, for anyone to assume, anyone who pretends to have a modicum of respect for a rules-based order, to see that as an open invitation to come and take over the resources of the country, in my opinion, is absolutely behaving like a global rogue. I repeat, a global rogue. Now, the point is very simple. Trump went on from bad to worse. This process had to be arrested, and arrested decisively, both for his sake and for the sake of his country, the United States of America, because this ill-advised misadventure on the part of Trump was spoiling the global image of America, whatever was left of it, and creating massive embarrassment for the well-meaning people in America. Of this, I'm quite sure. But they were marginalized, they were helpless, and Trump had managed to inject a fair dose of fear into the veins of such well-meaning people. I'm not merely talking about the Democratic Party, I have nothing to do with America's politics. But America as the foremost nation in the global village. America, envisaged by its founders as a city set on a hill to give light to the rest of the world, coming down to this sorry state, for me was a very painful spectacle. It still is. So I was looking forward to a time when this utterly untenable process would be brought to a halt. And nothing else could have done that as effectively and decisively as the Iran debacle has done. Now, as for the Iran debacle, do you have any doubt that President Donald Trump, whatever spin he might induce to what has happened there, has suffered the worst possible humiliation an American president has ever faced? I would say that the humiliation of Trump in Iran is comparable to the humiliation of Zelensky in the White House at the mercy of Trump and his sidekick J.D. Vance. So there is poetic justice in this. And this had to happen. I'm glad it has happened, because there's no way a person like Trump, a grown-up mental infant like Trump, can be brought to the modicum of human sense to realize that in this world, no matter who you are, there is a kind of equivalence or equilibrium between action and reaction. Whatever you do, that will be done to you. Whatever you mete out to others, the same measure will be meted out to you. Therefore, America as a nation, drunk on the power of its military and economic might, having succumbed through Trump to the delusion that its writ will run anywhere, everywhere, any time of the day and night, season of the year, had to be brought to the level of the sordid realities of this world. And I'm glad that this has happened. Now, look at Trump's obvious desperation. I was watching the developments in the last couple of days before the so-called ceasefire was announced. I was in no doubt whatsoever that Donald Trump was desperate, absolutely desperate unto death for a ceasefire. He was pleading with Iran to consent to a ceasefire. And at the same time, he was making the public statement that Iran is begging of him for a ceasefire. Utter falsehood. The fact that a man in such an august office can open his mouth and let his mouth be a sewer of falsehood is the most regrettable state of affairs. So, for the President of America to be reduced to the state of helplessness at the hands of a country that he did everything possible to weaken, to debilitate, to disarm, is something incredible, truly incredible. Now, in saying so, please do not think that I approve of what Iran stands for and has done. Iran is a theocratic state, and I'm passionately convinced that a theocratic state is a liability to itself and to the rest of humanity. And there is something tremendously significant in the Iran theater of war. The first casualty to the war was Ayatollah Khamenei. Now, that is a significant thing because he was the foremost victimizer of the people of Iran. He becomes the first victim. This is the law of history. Victimizer will become the victim. In the law of motion, action and reaction are equal and opposite. You victimize people, you will become victim. So there is again poetic justice. So what I'm trying to prove is that the Iran war is not an ordinary war. It's a war of tremendous historical symbolism and nuances, not all of which is evident now. In this context, let me, before I end, raise a very, very significant question. If my reading of the situation that I have so far shared with you is right, one thing is obvious. The Iran debacle or Iran confrontation will not end anytime soon. The present ceasefire will hold only for a short time, if at all, because the issues at stake are too huge to be compromised. Now, time will not allow me to take up various aspects of this for our discussion. Let me just highlight one aspect, which to me is very interesting. Because nobody else is talking about it, I thought I would take you into confidence in respect of this particular observation. Think of the situation before the war. Iran had sovereign control over its oil assets, oil, natural gas assets. And Trump's purpose in embarking on this ill-fated misadventure was to get a hold on that. He wanted to shake the very foundation of the Iranian sovereignty or sovereign control over its own assets, because the oil assets, oil natural gas assets are so significantly important for global economy, global stability, etc., etc. He had already pocketed Venezuela, and the next step is Iran. And if Trump had managed to get hold of this entire region, the world would have taken a tremendous turn in a particular direction. And that direction would be set for many, many decades to come. It is that direction that is completely demolished. That possibility doesn't exist. But the interesting thing that I want to draw your attention to is as follows. If, as I said before the outbreak of this hostility, Iran had sovereign control only over its oil and natural gas assets or deposits, now in the wake of the war and so-called precarious ceasefire, Iran has established a near sovereign control over a resource over which it had absolutely no claim. I'm referring to the Strait of Hormuz, which is virtually the jugular vein, first and foremost of this region, but also thereafter for the whole global community. This is an absolute bonanza, the like of which Iran could not have dreamt of in its wildest dreams. So unwittingly, President Trump has given a big boon to Iranians. Somehow they are not grateful. Now, that's why I'm saying that this event is of far greater significance than we can see at this point in time. And also why I say that it is not going to end in the manner that we expect it to end or we want it to end. We should have patience and sit and read the writings on the wall. Now, for example, if Iran insists on retaining and perpetuating its artificially acquired sovereign control over the Strait of Hormuz, it will create a condition that the rest of the world, particularly the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, cannot and will not accept. Iran now is very hyper. It thinks that it has arrived. It has an inflated and artificial sense of its importance, its power, etc. That picture can change very quickly. I hope Iranians have the sense to realize it. Therefore, Iran will fail to think rationally, responsibly, realistically about the desirability of retaining this artificially created control over the Strait of Hormuz. In my opinion, Iran would do serious harm to itself by doing so, though in the immediate perspective, Iran might think that this is a great shot in the arm because, after all, just as they make money through the oil deposits underground, it can now make a lot of money by controlling the traffic on the Strait of Strait of Hormuz, lots and lots of money. So double income, double mega income. But this second part of the double mega income will hurt many people, and that will certainly cause the reconfiguration of a historical force that will try and checkmate this Iranian misadventure. And therefore, if at this point in time, in part one, the protagonist who has got a bloody nose from this adventure, in the second part, Iran will be the protagonist to gain a bloody nose. Of that, I don't have the slightest doubt. This is the logic of history. History is a pendular swing. It has now swung in favor of Iran. At the next phase, it will swing away from Iran. Unless Iran shows the historical realism and a sense of responsibility in formulating a stand on this. Iran's great temptation now is to become a regional hegemon and exercise total control over the 5 GCC countries, which would make it one of the largest centers of power in the world, particularly the economic power. And you know very well that economic power can be very, very easily converted into military power. It takes a little while, that's all. Quicker now than it was ever before. So this is a terrible temptation for Iran. Iran has smelt the kill And it is hyper, it's gone hyper, and it is now refusing to think rationally. And therefore, Iran will become the counterpart of Trump. That is to say, chaos gone berserk. And Iran also will suffer the same plight as Trump, and through Trump, America is suffering at the moment. To see a country like America, to see the president of that great nation humiliated in this manner in the full gaze of the global community is both a painful and a very, very instructive spectacle. Think about it. Story abhi baki hai. Story still remains. Thank you. All the best.